Hey guys, the other day I was going through the comment section on my videos and a question came up, and that is, did you go no contact with your parents? That is, did you cut off contact as you got older? And are they now dying, or are they ill, and or they getting close to passing on? And I'm curious to find out how's that sitting with you, because I'm going to guess that it's probably not simple, even if you are estranged from them. And, I think a lot of people don't really understand, when you're estranged from your parents, or when you decide to minimize your contact with them. I know for myself, when I was in my 20s and I recently moved out here, I had a friend that came over to my apartment, and she said to me, "You don't have any pictures of your parents hanging on the wall, or on the desk. What's wrong with you?" And I remember getting really offended, but I didn't say anything to her, because in my head I was thinking, maybe you had the picture perfect life, but you don't know the story of my life, and you don't come in my place and tell me how I should feel, how I should, what I should do. So I was quite pissed off at her. And when I read the comment section, I noticed a significant number of you Gen Xers that were estranged from your parents either went with low contact, or you had no contact with your parent or both your parents when you became adults. And for a lot of Gen X kids, we experience, parents that weren't emotionally there for us. They didn't know how to parent properly because nobody gave them a playbook. And they probably learned to parent from their grandparents and probably face similar conditions and parenting styles. So a decision to have no contact with your parents is not an easy decision. And it's not what we wanted, right? I mean, nobody wants to say, hey, I want to cut off my parents one day. But I think a lot of us didn't have an option. And I know my decision to go minimize and have low contact with my parents at age 23 was was for me, it was a pretty tough decision, right? I had moved 1,000 miles away, but when it came to being the good, older Chinese kid, I decided, what, I can't do this any longer, because it was so much stress and burden on my shoulders. And that was when I was 23 when I left home, and I rarely spoke to him for probably 5 years. When I returned, yeah, it was 28 years old. So 5 years when I returned home. And the only reason why I returned to visit my parents during that time was to see a friend and attend a best friend's wedding. And I thought, what surprised me was, I thought, you know, um, that it was going to be this great reunion of sorts. And I remember I walked in the house, and my father was sitting on a couch waiting for me. And it just got really tense right away. They started questioning my life, saying that I was amounting to nothing, and I wasn't doing enough with my life, even though I was working a full-time job, and I also had a part-time job to try to make ends meet. And I was just starting to build my career. And I sat there being lectured like I was 28 years old. I'm sitting here being lectured like I was a 12-year-old again. And that made me really want to push away some more. And I remember throughout the years, in my 30s and 40s, I rarely went back to visit them. I rarely went back to celebrate Christmas. And I felt bad about it because I didn't get to see my brothers and sisters, but I always made the excuse of that I was busy, right? But in reality, I just didn't want to hear it anymore, right? But, here we are now, today, and most of our parents are probably in their 70s and 80s. And perhaps maybe you've received news from a family friend, a sibling, or a relative that your parents are ill, their health is declining, and you would think that when you're estranged and have all this animosity towards your parents that you would feel nothing, right? No emotion at all, but you actually do, and I don't know how to describe the feeling. And maybe you're asking yourself, why am I feeling this emotion? Especially for someone that's caused you so much anguish and pain in your childhood. So suddenly this buffer that you had of creating distance between yourself and your parents suddenly disappears, and you're now have to make a decision to be involved with their lives again. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, reconcile your differences, forgive them, get closure, or even to say goodbye to them, because there's many reasons why we decide to keep our distance or decide to forgive and or decide to get closure. But maybe for a lot of you who decide not to reconnect again, maybe decide to, you've wasted so much time and wishing that your parent would have been the model parent that you've always wanted or needed. And when they're, in declining health now or dying, perhaps maybe you don't see them as your parent. I know some of you mentioned that you felt relief when your estranged parent passed. And I guess many of you feel that way because now you feel like you can move on with life and they're not there to hurt you anymore. And I think the question everyone is asking is, when you get to this age, is should I reach out again? Do you go see them before they die? Will you regret it if you don't go? Am I going to go there for closure, or am I going out there to see them due to obligation and other people's expectations? I mean, there's a large amount of, I guess, social pressure to reconcile before a parent dies. Family members, old friends, and even sometimes strangers will tell you that you'll regret it if you don't. Now, some people go back and they're glad they did. And I've heard some stories of people that go back and they're disappointed and they're hurt again. And some people don't go at all and they're fine. And then some people go back and reconnect their parent and they regret it. But remember, whatever you decide, I believe it's your decision and not someone who is going to guilt you into going back to see your parent or parents. For me personally, I was lucky because this past December, as you've seen from my previous videos, I made peace with my parents. And for me, it's allowed me to release myself from this mental prison that I've been in for decades and living for years with. And, you know, when a estranged parent passes, I don't think, maybe some of us don't really grieve the relationship you had. You know, I think maybe it's more you feel sad for the relationship that you never got to have with your parents. You know, our parents didn't have the tools to parent properly, and I think you know, we grew up in a gap between two generations that never talked about this. You know, the Generation X and the Boomers, we didn't talk about our feelings. And now, you know, this new generation, they're always talking about their feelings. So most of the time, we dealt with these issues on our own. But whatever you guys decide about your estranged parents or parent, if you decide to go or don't go or reach out or still maintain your distance, just remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation. The relationship is yours, the pain is yours, and ultimately the decision in the end is yours. So I'd love to hear from all of you on this topic, because I know this isn't simple. And I know a lot of you are carrying this burden privately. So drop a comment below. Tell me where you are with it. You don't have to explain the whole story, just a comment, me too, is good enough. So if you like the content on this channel, and if this video resonated with you, please feel free to like, comment, or share, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Oh, don't forget, check out my next video. All right, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.